I just got back from Sony Camera Camp. If you guys don't know what that is, it's an event that's put on by iJustine and Sony. They invite about 100 creators, TikTokers, Instagrammers, YouTubers. It's a networking event, show off products, all that fun stuff. And you might be asking yourself, why in the world did they invite you? And I share that same exact question. It was a very humbling experience, but also very eye-opening and motivating and inspiring and educational in a way that I can't relay in words. Also, I got this great little hoodie thing and a new water bottle. Anyway, as part of this trip, Sony released and announced their brand new full-frame vlogging camera, and this thing is incredible. It's called the ZV-E1. You guys may have already heard about it and seen all of the reviews. And if you haven't heard about it or seen the reviews, then I'd encourage you to check out the reviews from my friends Gerald Undone, iPhondo, Jason Vong, a whole bunch of them great. Now, I'm not going to do a review in this video because I only got 2 short days with it, and I did shoot all of this B-roll with a ZV-E1, so if you want to see what it's capable of, here are some shots. But once I get a review unit, I'll make a follow-up with more detailed thoughts. And also with any new camera announcement, it's easy to get on the hype train. Look, it's an amazing camera, I get it, but I think some more time will definitely allow for me personally to gain a more logical and slightly more emotionally unbiased perspective. Now, the only full frame camera that I currently own is this Sony a7C, and this was a very exciting release when it came out because what Sony did is they took a full frame sensor, really the one out of the a7 III, crammed it into an APS-C size camera body and released it. And still to this day, this is the cheapest way to get into a full frame Sony mirrorless camera if you're looking for a new model. And the reason that I have this camera is primarily because I do a lot of lens reviews on this channel, and while you can review full frame lenses on an APS-C camera, it's better, I think, for me as a reviewer to give them a fair shot on the sensor that they are designed for. So that's why I own it. So I use it a lot for photography. It ends up really being in my office studio as an A-cam sometimes because I'm using all of my other APS-C cameras more than this. So anyway, this new camera release surely is a very exciting one, and all of the new features a bit unexpected because we got some stuff that maybe some people asked for, but a lot of the stuff is just crazy stuff that we had no idea was going to come out. We had no idea that Sony was working on it. I was just surprised at some of the AI stuff that was released with this camera. It's very exciting, and for me, the most exciting part about it is when inevitably Sony is going to trickle down some of these AI features into a new APS-C body, hopefully with a viewfinder. I'm very, very excited for that. Here's what I think about the new ZV-E1. I'm honestly a bit shocked because the equivalent in APS-C terms would be if Sony released a new APS-C camera that had all of the features and power of the new FX30 in a smaller body with a faster processor, added AI, almost doubled the stabilization performance, made it easier to use, even better autofocus, subject tracking, and framing, all for about $900 US. It would completely change the APS-C camera market, and that is exactly what's happening in the full frame realm right now. And it's entertaining to watch what is happening. Sony's biggest and best competitor is Sony, and the fortunate benefactors of all of these moves are the consumers. Unless you own an A7S III or FX3, I guess, but maybe not. I'll discuss that later. And it's a great move strategically, I think, because this new camera is going to bring in a giant wave of new users to Sony full frame, and along with that comes not only sales of the new body, but sales of accessories such as Sony microphones, Sony lenses, all of that fun stuff. And I think it's only going to be a good thing for the brand. In addition to that, you get brand awareness, because if all of your favorite people that have any sort of online presence are shooting Sony, then you are probably going to be enticed to shoot Sony yourself. And the camera really is a marvel of performance packed into a pocketable package. If you're looking for an easy to use, feature-packed full-frame camera in a tiny size for a reasonable price, the ZV-E1 makes perfect sense. But there are some problems, and maybe problems is a little too harsh of a word, but there are some considerations and some things, some shortcomings that you might want to think about before charging $2,200 on your credit card and picking up one of these new full frame cameras. And these are based on my experiences with the camera over 2 days, also the experiences of my fellow colleagues and some of the things that I've been seeing online as well. So let's jump into those. The build. Opinions can vary on this one. The ZV-E1 is made out of a lot of plastic, in particular recycled plastic, and while that is great for the environment, when you compare it to even my A7C, which I don't consider to be top tier in terms of build, the A7C does feel, at least to me, a touch more premium. It's a little bit heavier, and the big thing is it has a magnesium alloy body, and so it feels like you can use it in the elements and drop it and not worry about it as much as, unfortunately, the new ZV-E1. And again, this is just in my eyes. What you are paying for with this new camera is the internals and the performance. I just wish that they were protected by slightly better externals. Overheating. There's a lot of talk about this online, and overheating is related to the build of the body. This new camera has the processing power of the new A7R5 with more features, the sensor of the A7S III, and it's jammed into a body that was never designed to dissipate that much heat. Plastic is not a good material for doubling as a heat sink, so when you add all of this power and ability to record 4K 60 and eventually 4K 120, it's understandable that this camera shuts off after a while. That's why even though this camera has more features and more tech than something like the Sony FX3, I don't see a whole bunch of FX3 users going out selling their cameras and getting this thing because it's cheaper and less expensive. With the FX3, it has a built-in fan. You can run it forever and not have to worry about overheating. You can use it outside. And the same can be said really about the A7S III as well. It's a much larger body, more robust, and a more professional camera if you're using it for something like wedding videography. Dan Watson reviewed this new camera and in direct heat got some abysmal performance out of it. I'm talking less than 10 minutes of 4K video. And others on the trip were reporting overheating while simply going through the menus and not even recording. Now, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the 2 days that we were in San Diego were freezing and rainy off and on, so I didn't personally experience any overheating issues, but also I was just shooting very short clips of B-roll for this video. If you are using this for short clips, you'll probably be absolutely fine, especially at 4K 24, which is what most people use anyway. If you live in Phoenix or South Florida, it might be tough to keep things cool if you are using it outside. I think Sony is well aware of this issue. That's why they're marketing this new camera as a vlogging camera, not a professional videography camera. It's not for pro or semi-pro work. Along the same lines as the overheating thing, this new camera doesn't have dual card slots, so I would be nervous to use it for, let's say, weddings. And this is also why I think the 4K 120 has to be delivered later in a firmware update. Not only does the 4K 120 likely overheat the camera faster, but with the single SD card slot that is not also a CF Express card slot, there might be some juggling that Sony needs to do to get the camera to record that much data that quickly. But beyond that, the menu system and the settings are really optimized for casual users. And what I mean by that is if you hand this new camera to someone who's brand new to cameras, it's pretty easy to figure out quickly. But on the flip side, there are some settings that you simply can't use. For example, if you wanted to shoot in intelligent auto mode but use S-Cinetone as the color profile, you can't. Mini HDMI. This might be a small thing for people, and I think perhaps it is a limitation of the size of this camera, but the mini HDMI port is a little annoying. It's related to the fact that it's not really a camera designed for the pros, and this little port is just simply not as strong, and it does break with less force than a full-sized HDMI port, so that is a little unfortunate. Button layout. There are a few buttons that are oddly placed with this new camera. One example is the trash can button, which also doubles as the product showcase button. Now, product showcase is great. It allows you to hold up a product, let's say this camera, and then the focus would shift from my eyes to this camera if I had it enabled. The problem with this is I accidentally bumped that button on the back of the new camera, and for about 35 minutes I couldn't figure out why my autofocus was not tracking anyone's face or anyone's eyes anymore, And that was the reason. I was messing with the settings, trying to figure out how to turn it off, and then I realized, oh, it's right in front of my nose. Someone else also experienced the same thing and had to remap that button to a different function, which I think is a smart move. Along the same lines, some of the menu descriptions don't really make a whole lot of sense. Josh from Make Art Now, the YouTube channel, was rolling around on his one wheel with a gimbal and this new camera and a 400mm and later a 600mm Sony telephoto. And for the entire first day, he thought he was recording 4K 120, but instead it was a time lapse, a 4 frames per second time lapse in a 120 container. He was understandably frustrated the next day after trying to view everything that he shot. Great guy, check him out on YouTube. No viewfinder. If there is one reason I don't want to buy this camera, it's because it doesn't have a viewfinder. I know you guys have heard that before when I'm talking about the Sony ZV-E10, and I'd love to upgrade my Sony a7C to something like this new ZV-E1 and have basically go from 8-bit colors to 10-bit colors, much better video, all the cool AI features. It's really awesome, but again, primarily what I use this camera for is photography, and on a sunny day out in Texas, that EVF is invaluable, even though the EVF on this camera is nowhere near as good as the bigger bodied cameras. And really as important is the mechanical shutter, which is not present on the new ZV-E1. At this point, no ZV camera has a viewfinder. They are all purposely built video creator cameras. And while they can take some great photos, it's not the primary objective. You know better is coming. Cameras, probably not firmware. This is a little frustrating and maybe a little sad for those who went out and spent $3,500 on the Sony a7S III, and now you have a brand new camera that's better in every single way except for dual card slots, except for overheating and the build quality, and some other small features like the HDMI port. But the question is, will Sony give a7S III and FX3 owners those new features? Well, a lot of them they can't over firmware because it requires the new AI processor, but also Sony hasn't been doing routine firmware updates for its lineup either. A lot of people have been waiting for a long time for new features and fixes, and as I've mentioned before, for me, the excitement of this camera really is in the new features that will undoubtedly trickle down to future camera models. Unfortunately, no one knows how long we may have to wait for an updated, let's say, a7S IV with these specs and a bit more, but I have a feeling that we may see the APS-C lineup revitalization happen pretty quickly. Can you even imagine it? An FX30 processor and sensor with the AI processor of this ZV-E1 in a large grip compact camera body such as the a6600 with a viewfinder, gimbal-like stabilization, improved autofocus, mechanical shutter, and AI framing, all for around $1,000 US. I could dream. And that last reason really is a tough one because I do really like the new ZV-E1. This is not it, I keep pointing to it. I think it's a very ingenious, innovative, creative, unexpected new camera from Sony, and I'm genuinely tempted to purchase one to have as not even a B camera, but a C camera for my YouTube studio setup. My real excitement with this new camera release is the fact that Sony's going to make this AI thing happen for higher resolution cameras in the future, and as part of that, I'm hoping APS-C is included, which I think it will be. So the best is still yet to come. This is a great little camera, it's very fun to use, and for the target market of YouTubers, TikTokers, Instagrammers, and casual video shooters who want 4K video at the highest level, this new ZV-E1 is perfect. For me, it would be a perfect little studio camera. I could set it up and leave it as a dedicated A-roll camera. It's cool enough in our house, and the tracking and the framing features would make shooting videos easier and more fun. But in my rational, seemingly more minimalist state of mind as I get older and older, I can't justify, for me personally, buying this camera because it's not going to replace any other camera that I have. It's not going to replace the A7C for me because for photography, this is still, in my eyes, a better camera, especially if I'm reviewing lenses on this channel. So for me, it wouldn't really be a backup to a backup, it would be like a backup to a backup to a backup camera. And maybe that's a cheeky, genius little strategy from Sony, because if you take someone who is already a full frame video creator, let's say someone who already has invested a couple $1,000s into a full frame camera body, maybe has a couple camera bodies, has a couple $1,000s worth of lenses. I mean, even the 50mm f1.2, that's a $2,000 lens. What's an extra $2,200 to buy a small, very well featured run and gun, you don't have to worry about it camera that you could take with you everywhere, and it shoots just as good a video as your more expensive A7S III. It makes a whole lot of rational sense, and I can see a lot of people justifying that purchase. And I don't doubt the sales of this new camera are going to be excellent, strictly judging the feedback I was hearing from my fellow creators on this trip. Before they got the camera, it was, no, this thing is not for me, but after a day it became, yeah, I'm definitely gonna buy one. And I think that says it all. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.